for the longest time into the early hours of the morning, so turning quite chilly here. We could see some frost with temperatures in the low single figures, but generally staying not quite as cold elsewhere. Temperatures in the high single figures quite widely. So it's a cloudy and damp start for many of us on Monday. Outbreaks of rain continue to spread their way southwards as we go through the day on Monday. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a greyer and more cloudy day than we've seen over the weekend. Perhaps some hazy sunshine across the very far southeast, but it's parts of Scotland that will see the best of the sunshine through the afternoon, and a bit of a chillier day as well, with highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the north.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. I'm Dawn Neeson, and for the next couple of hours, I'm going to be joining you with a brilliant show coming up for you. Online, on telly and on radio, and coming up in the first hour. Are you proud to be English? Well, Labour leader Keir Starmer says Labour must not flinch from flying the St George flag, declaring that his party is the Patriotic Party now. Don't think he paused before that, but I did. Then a teacher has revealed her shock when she asked her pupils if they hated Britain, and 30 of them, 30, raised their hands, with some Muslim pupils claiming that the Taliban made Afghanistan a better place to be. How on earth have we ended up in this position? And research shows that smiling customers were able to barter for price reductions of almost 10% on products. So I'm asking, is offering a discount for cheerfulness a clever way to make Britain a nicer place to be? Yeah. And if you're wondering when I started giggling, I've got one of Michael Portillo's cinnamon balls, and I'm nearly choking on it. They were very lovely. If you missed his show, you won't know what I'm talking about, but it sounds as good as it was. Right, no, but this show is nothing without you and your views. So let us know all your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation, or message me on our socials, very simply at GB News. But first, it's the news headlines with Cameron.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary accusing him of emboldening anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. Cabinet Minister Claire Coutinho says the government is addressing the incident.
The Home Secretary has made clear that what happened was unacceptable. I understand there's going to be a meeting in the coming days. I don't know what conversation is going to take place there. I think we should see how that conversation goes. But ultimately, what's really important is that people in the Jewish community feel safe. They know that we're on their side, and that what we want to see is equal policing in this country, and also to make sure that they can go about their normal lives. That's what I want to see.
A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. 20 million people were plagued by antisocial behaviour and vandalism last year, according to new figures. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper's pledging that a Labour government would get tough to restore community safety. However, former police officer Oliver Lawrence says more policy isn't the answer.
More legislation, more policy, more procedure isn't going to fix it. I would argue that we've got more than enough, with more than 32 pieces of legislation already out there. What we need is proper enforcement and proper execution of the legislation by our justice system to make sure that we have penalties for people that commit these crimes in our communities.
The victims of last weekend's knife attack in Sydney have been remembered at a candlelight vigil on Bondi Beach. Six people were killed by Joel Calci in a shopping centre last Saturday. The attacker was shot dead by police. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese told the family and friends of victims that may those we have lost rest in eternal peace forever in our hearts. Wales is set to change a controversial law on nude speed limits. 500,000 people signed a petition raising concerns about the 20 miles per hour zones, saying some routes should not have been included. The government says the new limits will remain in place around schools, hospitals and built-up areas, but has admitted its guidance needs to be corrected in other places. The Welsh Transport Minister is expected to announce the changes on Tuesday. A new world record has been set at the London Marathon. Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir won the women's category. The Kenyan finished the race in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. Here's her reaction straight after the race.
Feeling grateful. I'm so happy, unbelievable. I was not expecting that. It's mean a lot for me because last year I was expecting to win, but unfortunately I didn't win. I was third, but I was happy too. But this year, I'm so happy.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Dawn on GB News Sunday.
Thank you very much, Cameron, and congratulations to everyone that's run or running the marathon today. I mean, you know, fair dues to you. That's a tough thing to do. In any case, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? In his latest attempt to paint Labour as the party of patriotism, Sir Keir Starmer has declared that Labour must not flinch from flying the flag of St George and said he himself was proud to be English. His claims are a bold attempt to outmanoeuvre the Conservatives on the issue of national identity and create a clear dividing line between himself and his predecessor, Jeremy Corbyn, who, if you remember, famously criticised for not singing the national anthem at a Battle of Britain memorial ceremony in 2015, I think that was, yeah. So are Labour now the party of patriotism? OK, well, let's find out, shall we? Let's talk to our GB News political correspondent and total guru, to be honest with you, Catherine Forster. Catherine, is this some would say a cynical attempt by Keir Starmer to get more votes by cuddling a flag, I think is the polite way of putting it?
Well, certainly, Labour have undergone a dramatic change, haven't they, from the days under Jeremy Corbyn, a man who didn't seem terribly happy to be British on many issues. And, of course, the Labour Party really wants to win back many of those voters that they lost to Boris Johnson back in 2019, traditional Labour voters who went over to the Conservatives largely because of Brexit, and many of whom are now very disaffected, and Labour would dearly like to get those voters back. So I think this is very much an appeal to them. Sir Keir Starmer has written in the Sunday Telegraph today a comment piece talking about how proud he is to be English, saying that the Labour Party will celebrate St George's Day with enthusiasm, and saying that Labour is now the true party of English patriotism, he says. He also says that the Conservatives have lost the right to be seen as patriotic because he says they've denigrated some of our proudest national institutions. He's talking, of course, about the National Trust, English footballers for taking the knee, the BBC, etc. It's a far cry, isn't it, from back in 2014, Emily Thornberry and that tweet that she put out of the English flags flying on this house with a white van parked outside. She had to resign following that tweet. And Sir Keir Starmer is saying he's got no time for those who flinch at displaying our flag.
I was just going to say, Catherine, that shot viewers were looking at just now of that house bedecked in St George's flag. I mean, that would have been really triggering for Emily Thornberry, wasn't it? I mean, she was really sneering at the working class, white van man football fan, wasn't she, when she did that? It was a good job she did go, to be honest with you. So Keir's trying to reclaim that back. Wasn't it just like a few weeks ago that members of the Labour Party were complaining that the Union flag was too obvious on electioneering our pamphlets?
Well, yes, exactly. And you're quite right, because many people feel that the English flag has sort of been hijacked by the right, if you like. It's not flown in the way that the Americans fly their flag in a very openly patriotic way, and people don't have a problem with it. But yes, you're quite right. Although the Labour leadership is very keen on flying the flag, whether it be the Union Jack or the St George's Cross, not everyone in his party has got the memo, because, yeah, you're quite right. It's just a couple of weeks since there was great concern within the Black, Asian, minority ethnic meeting of Labour activists and MPs, that they were concerned of the branding going into the local elections, the colours, the flag, that they thought that this was actively going to basically turn off a lot of the voters that they would want to vote for them, particularly ethnic minority voters. They were asking basically for different branding. So, activists apparently were refusing in some cases to hand these leaflets out because they felt that it was going to be absolutely unhelpful. So Sir Keir Starmer might be saying this. He might be writing in the Daily Telegraph, but there's certainly plenty of Labour activists and Labour MPs who are not very happy with this newfound love of the flag. Not at all.
Oh, a political party that's divided. There's something we don't hear every single day these days. Catherine, thank you very much, Catherine Forster. Right, now, we move on, kind of, but it's linked. Joining me now is our Yorkshire and Humber reporter, Anna Riley, who is in the most patriotic town in the north of England, and that's Morley. Hello there. Thank you very much for joining us today, Anna. And who's that with you?
Good afternoon, Dawn. I'm joined by Dame Andrea Jenkins, the MP for Morley and Outwood, and we've been enjoying the procession earlier. There was 1,500 people going in a procession through Morley to the rugby club where we are now. Lots of different sports groups, cubs, guides, a band. It was fantastic. Just tell us a little bit about this event and what it means to the community.
Oh, first of all, welcome to Morley again. This is your second time here. It's our wonderful annual event, and it really brings the community together, young and old, as you said, school children. And I mean, even the BBC said it's the most patriotic town in Britain, and it certainly is. And it's a way to bring the community together and celebrate being English, and I think that's wonderful.
And we've just been hearing about the comments made by Keir Starmer saying that Conservatives can't call themselves a patriotic party anymore. What do you make of that?
He is so disingenuous. I mean, let's not forget, he's the one who tried to stop Brexit. I was there in Parliament, he was in the opposition voting lobbies trying to collude to stop Brexit. So this is a guy who does not believe in the patriotism of our great country. And it's not the Conservative Party who actually has had councillors who are having a go at people who fly the St George's flag. It's actually councillors from the Labour Party, and let's not forget Emily Thornberry.
And he's also said Conservatives have degraded national institutions here in Britain. What would you say to that?
Well, isn't it right he wasn't a fan of the our previous Queen as well? That's what I understand. And he backed Corbyn, who was no friend of Britain. He was trying to get Corbyn into number 10. So I think slippery Starmer is not what you see, is what you get. The Labour Party are not the party of Great Britain, definitely not.
Dame Andrea Jenkins, thank you so much for sharing, and we'll be here at this event throughout the day here in Morley celebrating St George's Day.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Dame Andrea Jenkins, for joining us this afternoon. Well, there you heard that now. Let's see what our panel make of all this. A brilliant panel today, and they are going to be joining me in just a second, but we want your say as well on this one, and that is you can go to our website, gbnews.com. So, but now we have our panel, and that is the lovely Albie Amakona and the equally lovely Amy Nichol. Thank you very much for joining me today. So, we've heard what Keir Starmer's had to say, writing in the Telegraph. I mean, who knew that was the Labour Party? Thought it'd been the Observer, wouldn't you? About how patriotic the Labour Party is. Well, most of them. What do you make to what you've heard so far?
Well, yeah, writing in the Telegraph. I think that tells us what Keir's trying to achieve from what he said today. I found it quite surprising, really, because we do have a conflicted relationship with our patron saint. It would just be disingenuous to admit otherwise. It's not just Emily Thornberry who felt quite uncomfortable with St George's flag. It's a quarter of Britons who don't feel quite aligned with the St George's flag for whatever reason. So I don't think we should be afraid to say patriotism doesn't begin and end with the St George's flag, and I think Keir was exactly right when he said the Tories can't possibly be patriotic at the moment because of what they've done to our country. I think the best thing Keir Starmer could do is, instead of talking about the flag, fly the flag by giving Britain something to be proud of again and giving us our country back. The problem is we don't have much to celebrate at the moment.
Sound a bit like Lee Anderson there, Amy. I want my country back. Is that what you just said?
Giving us something to be proud of rather than banging on about the sentimentality around a flag that most people ultimately don't really like.
Hold on. It seems to work quite well in Scotland, Albie, doesn't it? What's wrong with the English flag?
There's absolutely nothing wrong with the English flag, and I think it's actually quite refreshing to hear a Labour Labour politician talk about patriotism and talk about the flag in a positive way. And the reason he is writing in the Telegraph is because he knows that there are lots of disaffected Tory voters out there that are looking for another party to vote for at the next general election. The question is, will they vote for Labour or will they vote for Reform, or will they stick with the Conservative Party? So this is some clever politicking from Keir Starmer, but ultimately his past, having been one of Jeremy Corbyn's cheerleaders, a man who couldn't even sing the national anthem at a Battle of Britain memorial celebration, that will always be part of Keir Starmer's legacy. So my question is, can you actually believe Keir Starmer when he talks about patriotism, when he talks about the flag being a beacon of Britishness, inclusion and so on? Is he actually believable?
It's not, is it? Because if we look at an image like this, is that a beacon of inclusion? Does that feel welcoming? Does that make you feel proud to be British? Or even the Emily Thornbury one?
Hold on, what?
The Emily Thornbury one, like, is this what is our
Are you offended
national
by some...
I'm not offended, but I can see why certain people wouldn't feel particularly comfortable
Explain it.
walking along this street. Because since the 1970s, this has been hijacked by far-right groups. So I think certain people...
That was celebrating an England football match.
But you know that if you saw that, if you walked into a pub and it was covered in these, would you feel welcomed in that pub, or would you feel slightly threatened?
Why wouldn't I feel welcome?
For as long as time, since the 1970s, it's been associated with the far right, British Front, BNP.
But Amy,
I think it's lost touch with a lot of British public.
Who has told you that?
The National Front.
No, who has told you? Because I imagine the people you're talking about who feel uncomfortable walking around where there are England flags are probably not white. I'm not white. I'm asking you who has told you that they feel uncomfortable when they see an England flag.
I was looking at some polling today from YouGov about why people don't dislike the St George's flag, and it was a quarter of Brits, and it was mainly the association with the BNP and the National Front, and it was the hijacking of the St George's flag and the fact that these groups used it, which is a bit of not a good a taste in people's mouths about the flying of that particular
But shouldn't it be reclaimed from those far-right elements?
Well, you can try, but I think...
To become a proper beacon of national unity in the same way that the Scottish flag is, in the same way that the American flag is, in the same way that the Welsh flag is. I don't see why in the United Kingdom we have to be... You can be proud of your flag for any other nation apart from if you're English. But if you are English, you've got to push it away.
It's not quite true, because the same amount of people were unhappy flying the Scottish flag, the Welsh flag, the American flag has similar connotations. It promotes the idea of nationalism, doesn't it, which is not inclusive.
Why is nationalism not inclusive?
Because it's saying...
You can have civic nationalism or you can have ethno-nationalistic nationalism.
It's interesting.
They're two very different types of nationalism. If you speak to the Scottish National Party, what they talk about is civic nationalism. Now, they would say that nationalism was inclusive.
But loads of people are unhappy with the Scottish National Party and don't agree with the nationalism and want to be in the Union.
But they can disagree with what the SNP think, but they still fly the Salter, the flag of Scotland. Most people aren't offended by that flag.
Well, a quarter of people don't really like that flag either. And every time we try to update the St George's flag or make it a bit different or modernise it in some way,
Amy,
people are really unhappy with that as well.
You keep talking about a quarter of people without talking about the three-quarters of people who actually like it. Now, surely, as someone who believes in democracy, we should be focusing on the majority, which is 75%, and not the 25% of people who dislike it.
But you agreed with me that it needs to be modernised.
But that doesn't mean the flag needs to be changed. I think it can be reclaimed from the far right, and I think, to many extents, it has been reclaimed from the far right. When I see a St George's cross, I don't think of the BNP. I think of England, I think of home, I think of my family, I think of the rolling green hills.
I don't think
of some skinheads on a march.
I don't think most people do think of those things. I think we need to put more effort into reclaiming it if we're going to achieve.
I think that might be what you think and not what the majority think.
Perhaps.
Well, here's your chance to let us know what you think. I mean, are you Team Amy or are you Team Albie? What do you make? I mean, the flag? I mean, www.gbnews.com/you'll say. It's such a mouthful. It's on the screen there, that one. OK. But let's talk about different countries, shall we, for now? There's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies and a £10,000 tax-free cash bank. And here's all the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Just checking whether Amy's OK with the Greek flag before we discuss that. But that's our competition. Get entry. You can enter. You can go to Greece. They've got a nice flag. Anyways, I'm Daubney and this is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Now, we go to another country, Wales. They like their flag. Some roads in Wales are set to go back to 30 miles an hour after nearly 500,000 people called for an end to the national 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. Is this screeching U-turn, see what we did there, the right move for Wales? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about Sebastian? It really amazes me how a mother who can lose a child in such a shocking and unexpected way, so little, so precious, can then turn that grief into something so positive. How did you find the strength to get up, get a camera crew, as you say, travel to the other side of the world and investigate all of this?
I was angry at Sebastian for dying. You know, you feel like saying, God, 32 years later, and I can still get very, very upset about it. I was angry that something that while he was born and lived with me and slept and then died, they were actively campaigning in New Zealand to try and stop this happening because they had a very high cot death rate there. They had the lady, the Anne Diamond, if you like, of New Zealand, a television presenter called Judy Bailey, went on telly every night and said, if you're just about to put your baby down to sleep, put him on his or her back, not the tummy, and this will help. And their cot death rate plummeted. And I went out to New Zealand and met her, and it was anger that drove me to come back and demand that we have the same advert here, the same campaign. And of course, I got all this complete nonsense from the Department of Health saying, you know, oh, young mothers do not watch television, I was told. In other words, while New Zealand mums were being told how to save their babies' lives, we actively denied British mums that advice during the time that Sebastian and others were dying.
And the other point, I suppose, to make is it's helpful to educate all generations, because when I had my babies, my mum would say, he's not settling, just stick him on his tummy, he'll be much happier, that's what we did with you. And we had to say, well, things have changed, and, you know, but it's about educating everybody, because it's not just the mums that get their hands on the babies.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yeah, we're only halfway at the beginning of the show, and already these two are at it. Right, welcome back. It's GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch, and I mean loads of you, and some of you have even been quite nice about Amy.
Never.
Sorry about that. No, they have. Look, you're brave, you've got an opinion. This is GB News. Everyone is entitled to their opinion, and it's good to have debate. OK. So on Sir Keir's patriotism, Wendy, good afternoon, Wendy says, typical Sir Keir Starmer now being patriotic. Poor Emily Thornberry won't like this, and of course Labour is still loyal even to BLM. Dear me, on their knees 1 minute, up now supporting the St George's flag and also the EU flag next. Reform UK for me. Lots of you echoing that sentiment. Jenny says, this is so disingenuous of Starmer. More empty words to try and gain favour with the voters who know he will undo Brexit. OK, Simon says, not a lot of love in the room for Starmer here. Simon says, I wouldn't believe Starmer even if he told me the sky is blue. There you go. Not a lot of support on that one, is there? Right, OK, but now let me know all your thoughts on what we're discussing today by visiting, and this is how you do it, right? OK, it's on the screen coming up now. You visit gbnews.com/your say. Put it on the screen. There you go. That's it. That's how you do it. Lots of you have been getting in touch. Really simple. Even I can do it now. Join the conversation, or you can message me on our socials, which is even easier, just at GB News, about everything we're talking about or what you want to talk about, in any case. And you can even say nice things about Amy. That's allowed.
You can.
Now, let's go to Wales. Are you OK with that flag? Oh. Sorry, Wales. Some roads in Wales are set to go back to 30 miles an hour after nearly 500,000 people called for an end to the national 20-mile-an-hour speed limit. The Welsh Government's new transport minister, new one, said there will be a change to legislation introduced in September, which changed the speed limit on nearly all roads from 30 miles an hour to 20 miles an hour. But is this a screeching U-turn? That joke's so good we've used it twice. Albie, coming to... I didn't write it, by the way, someone out there did. Albie, coming to you, says, now, this was Mark Drakeford's idea, wasn't it? That every single road now, bearing in mind, roads in Wales are, a built-up area in Wales is like literally 3 cottages and 4 sheep. That's a built-up area. But it is, come on. Lots of it is like that. So Mark Drakeford had this brilliant idea that all roads should be 20 miles, nearly all roads, OK, should be 20 miles an hour. Now, we've got the new people coming in there saying, actually, we're going to talk to people about how they feel about this and maybe go back to 30 miles an hour. What do you make of this?
And guess what? People don't like it. What a surprise. Who could have told Mark Drakeford that people didn't like 20-mile-an-hour speed zones, and actually they'd rather 30-mile-an-hour speed zones? Now, I think it was a laudable aim. He wanted to reduce, I think it was, injuries and fatalities on the road and also have some sort of impact on the climate. That is a perfectly reasonable and laudable aim. Of course. And we can commend people that want to do that. But we should not be trying to reach those targets by restricting people's freedom. And the whole car policy in Wales under Mark Drakeford was absolutely bonkers. It wasn't just these 20-mile-an-hour speed zones on all major roads. It was also not allowing any new road infrastructure in Wales being built ever again, which is totally nuts in a country where public transport's not been invested enough in, and actually a lot of people rely on their cars. I think it's one thing to say in London, well, you can use the tube, you can use the bus, there's no need to drive, even though there is a need for people to drive. It's another thing to say that in Wales, where actually people rely on their cars. So it's no surprise that under Vaughan Gething, who was the new First Minister of Wales, we've seen a screeching U-turn, as you put it, on the car policy of Mark Drakeford.
Albie, we've done the joke, right? OK, we've done it. It's gone. OK, get on. Yeah, but this is my joke, actually. I mean, this is the new Transport Minister, whose name is hilariously is Ken Skates. So he's got his skates on. See what I did there? Let's carry on up. GB News. What do you make of this? I mean, they're just... No, the Welsh Government are just going to the people and going, OK, what do you want in your area? That makes sense, doesn't it?
I'm not sure it is a screeching U-turn, because this had cross-party consensus, and when it went through, the idea of it was that all the roads would be a 20-mile-an-hour blanket instead of 30 mile an hour, and then the local council can apply to get them changed back to 30 miles an hour. So I think this was kind of always the intention, that quite a few of the roads would be put back to 30 miles an hour. But the thinking behind it is all around children's safety. And I understand that you'd think, oh, you need 20-mile-an-hour zones around schools, places of worship, hospitals. But actually, in reality, it was the children that were being hit by cars were not being killed in those areas. They were more on residential roads. So the places of the fatal crashes were not the places you would expect, which led to the development of this bill. But since it's come out, and like I said, it had cross-party consensus. It made sense. People liked the sound of this, but it's kind of been hijacked and funneled into this supposed war on motorists. And I don't think this necessarily is. It's about children's safety. It's about what children are at risk of in Wales, which is why it made sense when it went through. But the reporting of it has been quite difficult to follow, which has led to things like this, where people think it's a screeching U-turn when I'm not convinced it is.
So are you saying that people actually do like it, but the media is making them think that they don't like it?
Pretty much, yes, because...
Amy, come on. I mean, are you a motorist? Do you drive?
You know, another thing people didn't like? They didn't like seatbelts when they first came in. They didn't like not being able to smoke in their car with their kids in the back when it first came in. Things take a bit of a while to adjust to. And this wasn't about making everywhere 20 miles an hour. It was making that the default, and then like 30 miles an hour previously would, and then local council would apply to make certain roads 20.
At vast
it was
expense
swapping. It was swapping that, and it was found that if you hit a child at 20, then they are very likely to die. But if you hit a child, at 30, they're very likely to die. If they hit a child at 20, they won't. They'll probably survive it. So it was all with children's safety at the forefront of the thinking behind this bill.
I think that's understandable, but I do slightly shudder when people bring back these arguments to, well, people didn't like seatbelts when they first came in. I will say libertarians were wrong when it came to seatbelts. Libertarians were wrong when it came to smoking bans inside. I think this is different. This is not saying that people shouldn't be able to drive at all in cities. That would be nuts. It's just saying that actually, for motorists, we need to figure out what the balance is between the safety of children or other people in the environment and the costs that come with driving, the risks associated with that, and also the freedom of the driver. And if you speak to most drivers, they much prefer driving at 30 miles an hour than 20 miles an hour, because 30 miles an hour is actually quite slow. And ultimately, what is the nth degree of your argument? Do we have 0 mile an hour zones because we're so worried about children dying if they're hit by cars?
Absolutely, that's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is that when every expert went through Parliament and put their evidence forward, it became clear that this is a simple way to prevent child fatality.
I'm sorry, folks, I'm going to have to put the brakes. See?
Screeching.
Screeching. We've run out of time. Screeching brakes, yeah. This is Daubney, it's GB News Sunday, and there's plenty more coming up on today's show. But first, we've kept him waiting long enough. It's the news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Dawn, thank you. It's 1:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary also suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. As you've been hearing, Wales is set to change its controversial law on the new 20 miles per hour speed limit after 500,000 people signed a petition raising concerns. The government says the new limits will remain in place around schools, hospitals and built-up areas, but has admitted its guidance needs to be corrected in other places. The Welsh Transport Minister is expected to announce the changes on Tuesday. Kenyan Alexander Munyeo has won the London Marathon. The 27-year-old finished the race in 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the women's category, Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir set a new world record. Also Kenyan, she finished the race in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Remember, let us know all your thoughts on the stories we're discussing today, or just anything you want to chat about. It's a Sunday afternoon. Visit gbnews.com/your-say and join the conversation, or message me on our socials. We're at GB News. And there's lots more coming up on today's show. Oh, God, Amy's going to have a meltdown. A teacher has revealed her shock when she asked her pupils if they hated Britain. How on earth have we ended up in this position? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's another dry start for many of us this morning with plenty of sunshine around. However, cloudier conditions out towards Scotland due to this weak weather front that's going to be sinking its way southwards through the rest of today. High pressure is still in charge though, so that will be bringing us those sunnier skies, particularly across much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland through today, probably seeing the best of the sunshine. Maybe the odd one or two showers just skirting along the southeast coast of England, but it's across eastern parts of Scotland and into Northern England that we'll see the cloudier skies today, with outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way southwards through the day. Feeling warm in that sunshine, highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the south, perhaps 16 across Northern Ireland, but definitely feeling chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Sunday, that cloud continues to sink its way southwards across much of the UK overnight and into the early hours of Monday morning. Southern and eastern parts of England perhaps holding on to some of those clearest skies for the longest time into the early hours of the morning. So turning quite chilly here. We could see some frost with temperatures in the low single figures, but generally staying not quite as cold elsewhere. Temperatures in the high single figures quite widely. So it's a cloudy and damp start for many of us on Monday. Outbreaks of rain continue to spread their way southwards as we go through the day on Monday. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a greyer and more cloudy day than we've seen over the weekend. Perhaps some hazy sunshine across the very far southeast, but it's parts of Scotland that will see the best of the sunshine through the afternoon, and a bit of a chillier day as well, with highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the north.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online, on digital radio. And I'm not censoring what you're sending in, honestly. Amy has just been reading them over my shoulder, and she loves you all. If you want to join in the conversation, mostly about Amy, it has to be said, it's www.gbnews.com/your-say. I'll remember this by the end of the programme. I'm going to read some of them out now. Some of them, the ones I can read out. Janice, good afternoon, Janice. On the English flag, she said, I'm English and proud of it. I love our royal family. I'm sick of being made to feel it's wrong and patriotic. We are the only country in the world that makes people feel it wrong to be patriotic. Enough is enough. And yet so many of you are agreeing on that, and I don't understand what's wrong in any case. Meanwhile, Andrew says, a national identity is seriously lacking, especially in England. It's the birthplace of the world's most widely spoken language, and that alone should be a major sense of pride. Shakespeare Day is also the 23rd of April and should be a national holiday, acting as a focus for the celebration of art, literature in this country. Unfortunately, the left, everyone's looking at you, Amy, hate our history, culture and heritage. But lots of you in support of the flag. Everyone's team Albie today, which is quite unusual, isn't it, Albie, you were saying?
It is, because normally I'm next to Darren Grimes and everyone's left-wing next to Darren Grimes.
Oh, on the Saturday 5 thing. Yeah. And Genghis Khan probably would be. Yeah. So, but any case, let us know on all the stories we're discussing today. As you say, gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation, or message on the socials. Right, this is another one that's really going to get your go and Amy's go. A British teacher has revealed her shock when she asked... Actually, I don't know if it's a her, it might be a he. It's an anonymous teacher. Has revealed their shock when they asked their pupils if they hated Britain, and 30 of them in a class raised their hands without thinking about it immediately. In an after-school detention, some Muslim pupils even tried to convince a teacher that since the Taliban took over Afghanistan, it had become a nicer place to live. Once the teacher expressed their concern to other teachers, they revealed the pupils had similar thoughts in their classes too. I'm asking, how have we got in this position? I want to know, why do British kids born and brought up over here hate their country so much? Amy, what do you make of this one?
Well, I always approach these stories with a little pinch of salt, because this is an anonymous teacher with one account, just one account. But the conclusion of the piece was basically calling for a balanced curriculum and emphasising the importance of, critical thinking about our history, teach the good and the bad. And I hope that, our history isn't so fragile that it can't withstand a bit of critical thinking and discussion. Some of the things in it were concerning, but there was a section here. Many of the boys I teach have shocking views on women. Then it says, 1 year 8 pupil regularly interrupts lessons with diatribes about how Western society is brainwashing young men into becoming more feminine. Now, he could have just been watching Leo Kurth on a Saturday night, really, with that. One of the lads I teach...
Actually, Andrew Tate is their hero.
One of the lads I teach think women should have fewer rights than men and spend citizenship lessons arguing that wives should not work. Now, that's also closely associated with this whole Christian... traditional trad wife movement. You could have been watching Midday and Natcom.
They're not talking about Christianity here, are they? Because if we, and I take your point, all the Abrahamic religions actually, if you look at the scripture, have quite similar regressive views on women and gay people and so on and so forth. But actually, in this specific example, the anonymous teacher is saying that the majority of the people in this class are of the Muslim faith, and they believe things like, actually, things have got better for girls in Afghanistan since the Taliban took over. So let's actually talk about the group of people that are being spoken about in this article. We can't shy away from things which are happening. And actually, I think the most interesting part of this article, aside from the very almost obvious and banal views of what perhaps devout people of faith have, is that they talk about one of the reasons why they hate the United Kingdom and Britain being the abuse that they face in their day-to-day lives. And I think that's actually quite interesting. It's not going to be, it's not a case of, well, if these people believed in different things, they wouldn't feel this way. Well, actually, it's a case of perhaps the population having to treat people in a more fair and inclusive manner so they feel more positively about the place they live. It's a multi-pronged approach which is going to solve this problem. It comes from a better national curriculum. It comes from people actually being more proud of the country which has given them so much. But it also comes from people being less discriminatory to people that move to this country. And then hopefully we can find a way forward where no child hates the country that they're born in, because it is a fact that Britain is a better country to live in than almost any country in the entire world, and we are all lucky to live in this great country.
I think you are absolutely right. And one of the things that I would like to pick up on that you said is in the article, the writer admits that a Muslim teacher told me that she had been called a terrorist in the street, and the children will have faced similar harassment, because this was a predominantly Muslim school. And they describe how the children's childhoods were spent watching what was going on in wars around the world, such as the Iraq War, and then the hostile environment policies of Theresa May's government, Brexit, and now the Rwanda plan. And all of these three things were contributing to the idea that the children had a dislike of Britain. So I think you're absolutely right that it does come back to the way that we integrate and welcome people when they come to live in the UK.
The point is, though, they choose to come and live in the UK, Albie.
They do choose to come and live in the UK, and I think what's interesting, actually, is that in my grandfather's generation of migrants, when my grandfather came here in the late 1950s, and the Windrush generation that came to the UK at a similar amount of time, they faced horrendous discrimination. They would never have taught their children to hate this country. My father and his siblings don't hate this country, even though when they were growing up in the 60s, 70s and 80s, they would have faced horrendous racism. And I think there is a difference, perhaps, with the more recent waves of migration that we have seen, not from Commonwealth countries, and the waves of migration that we saw in the past from Commonwealth countries, where they were coming from very culturally similar countries to the United Kingdom, to immigration now, where actually there is less of that similarity, and there seems to be a lot more antipathy towards British values and integrating into British society and becoming British, which is something that people wanted to do when they moved here in the mid-20th century.
But equally, don't you think that our government will have a role to play in integration as much as the individual does? And that's kind of been stripped back over the past government. So if we're not providing things like English language classes, and then we become surprised why people struggle to integrate, there's more that our government can be doing to integrate as much as the individual.
The problem I have with this particular story is we're not actually teaching kids the basics. I mean, one of the shocking things I thought is that a Year 8 student on the Black Tudors, that's a thing evidently, one pupil raised their hand and say, who were the Tudors? So we're not actually teaching the basics of history before we're lecturing about how racist this country is.
It's so hard, though, because my son just brought his history home, where he's 9 years old, and it just feels like there is no rhyme or reason to why history is so vast.
Of course.
That it doesn't always make sense when they come home and he says, oh, I need to know why Henry VIII cut his 6 wives' heads off. And I'm thinking, well, what relevance is that going to have to helping him understand the world today?
Well, it's separation of church and state. That's the important thing that happened during the Tudor era.
He doesn't take any of that from the way he's learning it.
We're not here for a history lesson, evidently. Thank you very much, though, just in case you were watching and you knew more about the Black Tudors and what the actual Tudors were.
But I don't believe that, because Black History Month is, 1 month a year, and it's not integrated into...
You know that women got their heads chopped off back in the day? Careful. Right, I'm Daubney, and this is GB News Sunday. I wasn't really threatening her, honestly. There's lots more coming up on today's show. Research shows that smiling customers were able to barter for price reductions of almost 10%. So is offering a discount for cheerfulness a clever way to make Britain a nicer place, including our lovely flags? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
It's a remarkable story, isn't it?
Amazing.
Extraordinary. And also, she was unflappable, apparently, the Princess Royal.
She's
just
brilliant.
refused to get out of the car and said, I'm not going anywhere. Extraordinary. Well, Jim Beaton was awarded the George Cross for protecting the princess, and delighted to say joins us now, along with the former head of royalty protection, Di Davis. Jim, you won't remember, but I met you some time ago at the Imperial War Museum when Princess Anne was opening an exhibition to do with the George Cross, and you were there reunited with her. And you told me then what great admiration you had for the princess, cool under fire, but you didn't do so badly yourself.
It was probably my job, and also I had a wee bit of police training, not very much, but a little bit, whereas Princess Anne had nothing, and yet the way she displayed it, you would have thought she'd been highly trained to deal with any type of that situation.
Even though you'd had some training, you took 3 bullets for the princess. You effectively stood between her and a deranged gunman.
Well, I was supposed to be a protection officer, really, so I just tried to fuddle about. You must remember that back in 1974, there was no communication, and we were extremely lucky that Michael Hills, who was outside Clarence House and nearby, had got one of the fast police radios, or radios on his shoulder, so he was able to send a message out. Otherwise, we would have just been relying on the good old public to phone in and say there was something happening.
Yeah.
So times have changed drastically.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country.
That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, manners cost nothing, the old saying goes, but now it looks like you get more from your cheesy grin. That's good, isn't it? Research shows that smiling customers were able to barter for price reductions worth 10%, while angry or disgusted buyers had to pay the full prices. So is offering a discount for cheerfulness a clever way to make Britain a nicer, happier, smilier place? Amy? She's looking at me in that scary way. Come on, smiling. If you smile at people, they're happier, they're going to be nicer to you. It's common sense.
And apparently, if you smile, your brain tricks itself into thinking you're also happier. So it's a win-win.
Win-win.
Good for them, good for you.
Now Albie's frowning at me. What is wrong with you two today? Stop frowning. Smile.
I'll smile. Is that going to make you be nicer to us? That's the
question. Yes, of course. I'm very nice to both of you.
Well, my experience of this is mostly when it comes to when you're at a bar and you're trying to order a drink. I always try to smile because then I think the barmaid or man might come to me more quickly, and generally speaking, they do. So I was reading this article and thinking, well, I can completely understand this smile or happiness premium, as they call it, where people actually they get money off when they're bartering with a smile rather than bartering with a frown, where they actually have to pay full price. You actually there's an economic incentive to smile as well.
Yeah, and you can get actually almost 10% off. But the bit I didn't understand on this story is you can get 3% off if you're doing it online. How's that work?
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that's like the psychological element that I'm talking about, like cheer yourself up.
Maybe if you're talking to one of those AI chatbot things and you're being nice to them. But I mean, are you a natural smiler, Amy? Do you smile when you're, interacting with other people?
I think so.
OK, I think so.
You definitely do. You're definitely a smiler. Yeah. I try and smile because otherwise my resting face is not a very kind face.
Not a good look.
No, it's not. It's not a good look.
Sorry, that's a bad word. Sorry if you're upset by that.
And the online
it's a phrase.
Here, they know how to screen grab that resting face. I've had many awkward screen grabs here.
Yeah.
If you go on the website.
But do you find you respond nicely or better to people?
Definitely.
If they're smiling and friendly towards you?
Because it's a sign, isn't it? It's like, it's OK, you're safe, like, carry on, you're welcome. Yeah, definitely.
It's body language, isn't it? And actually so much language and how we interact with each other is about body language. It's not necessarily about what we say, it's about what position our body is in, whether or not we're smiling, how our eyes look. There's so much that the human mind picks up on, which is non-verbal, and smiling is just part of that.
I think so as well. So I'm going to smilingly now, is that even a phrase, introduce you to what's coming up next. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News Sunday, just in case you haven't got that by now. And there's lots more coming up on today's very smiley, happy, flag-waving show. But first, we're going to check out what the weather is doing for you on this glorious Sunday afternoon. Hope you're having a good one. Find out. Here's Ellie with the weather for you.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday and Wednesday as well, and further hints of something more unsettled through the second half of the week.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Smiling. Lots more coming up on today's show. The anti-Semitism rages on. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman is leading calls today for Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley to quit over what she describes as a litany of failures in policing pro-Palestinian rallies. But should the Met Chief stand down? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't get too far.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Sunday. Thank you for joining us this Sunday lunchtime. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. I'm Daubney, and for the next hour I'll be keeping you company on your telly, online and on digital radio. And coming up this hour, the anti-Semitism row rages on. Former Home Secretary Suella Braverman is leading calls today for Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley to quit over what she describes as a litany of failures in policing pro-Palestinian rallies. But should the Met Chief stand down? What do you reckon? Then one head teacher in Notting Hill has come up with a radical new way to tackle phone addiction amongst his pupils. Introduce a 12-hour school day. What do you make of that one? And we'll be debating the reported eco-zealot plot to secure key jobs at major airports and storm runways to unleash an unprecedented summer of holiday hell around the world. And I can't wait to hear what you've got to say about that lot. And this show is nothing without you and your views. It's not about me or the panel, it's about you. So let us know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today, or anything you want to chat about a Sunday afternoon chill. Visit gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation. Or message me on our socials at GB News. But first, it's the news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Dawn, thank you. It's 1 minute past 2. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. The campaign against anti-Semitism is also calling for Sir Mark to resign or be sacked after its chief executive was described as openly Jewish by an officer. Cabinet Minister Claire Coutinho says the government is addressing the incident.
The Home Secretary has made clear that what happened was unacceptable. I understand there's going to be a meeting in the coming days. I don't know what conversation is going to take place there. I think we should see how that conversation goes. But ultimately, what's really important is that people in the Jewish community feel safe. They know that we're on their side, and that what we want to see is equal policing in this country, and also to make sure that they can go about their normal lives. That's what I want to see.
A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. After months of wrangling, American politicians ended a deadlock, agreeing to provide a package which will also help replenish weapons and munitions. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. 20 million people were plagued by antisocial behaviour and vandalism last year, according to new figures. Shadow Home Secretary Yvette Cooper says a Labour government would crack down on yobs. She promised the party would get tough to restore community safety. Former police officer Oliver Lawrence says more policy isn't the answer.
More legislation, more policy, more procedure isn't going to fix it. I would argue that we've got more than enough with more than 32 pieces of legislation already out there. What we need is proper enforcement and proper execution of the legislation by our justice system to make sure that we have penalties for people that commit these crimes in our communities.
The victims of last weekend's knife attack in Sydney have been remembered at a candlelight vigil on Bondi Beach. Six people were killed by Joel Cauchi in a shopping centre last Saturday. The attacker was shot dead by police. Australia's Prime Minister Anthony Albanese told the family and friends of victims that may those we have lost rest in eternal peace, forever in our hearts. Wales is set to change a controversial law on new speed limits. 500,000 people signed a petition raising concerns about the 20 miles per hour zones, saying some routes should not have been included. The government says the new limits will remain in place around schools, hospitals and built-up areas, but has admitted its guidance needs to be corrected. The Welsh Transport Minister is expected to announce the changes on Tuesday. A record number of people are running the London Marathon. Supporters are lining the route to support the 50,000 runners currently taking part. The general public, many dressed in costumes, started just after 10 o'clock this morning. They're raising millions of pounds for charities. Professional athletes kicked off the event with Kenyan Alexander Munyeo winning the race in 2 hours and 4 minutes. In the women's category, Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir set a new world record. Also Kenyan, she finished in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. She says she was surprised by her achievement.
Feeling grateful. I'm so happy, unbelievable. I was not expecting that. It means a lot for me because last year I was expecting to win, but unfortunately I didn't win. I was third, but I was happy too. But this year I'm so happy.
Good luck to all the runners taking part there. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Dawn.
Thank you, Cameron. And echoing what Cameron's just said, if you have taken part or are currently taking part in the London Marathon, whether you're an elite athlete or you're dressed as a giant potato at the back, fair play to you. You're doing a sterling job, a really full admiration for you. And lots of you have been getting in touch. Obviously, well, you might be running the marathon while you're doing it, but this is my favourite one. It's loads of you, right? Dennis is the one that's just popped up on my screen. Here's a smile for you. We're discussing about smiling, how it makes you happy and how people treat you better if you smile more. And loads have been sending little smiley emojis in. That's lovely. Thank you. Do keep them coming in. And also, John says, hi, John. John says, Dawn, I hope your husband looks after you because your work ethic is tremendous. John, I'll let you into a little secret. He likes me out of the house, OK? You'd understand if you live with me for any length of time. In any case, if you want to have your say, it's on there. You can read that. I'll read it out. Look, www.gbnews.com/your say. But keep them coming in. It's really, really good to talk to you on a Sunday afternoon because, you know, I get lonely, despite the panel. Right, OK, or maybe because of the panel. Let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today. That's exactly how you do it. Or you can do it on the socials. That's just at GB News. That's so simple, even I can remember it. Now, and as you've just been hearing in the bulletins, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman is leading calls today for Metropolitan Police Chief Mark Rowley to quit over what she describes as a litany of failures in policing pro-Palestinian rallies. The latest scandal embroiling the Met is the force's reaction after an officer used the term openly Jewish to describe an anti-Semitism activist, Gideon Forter, who was stopped literally just crossing the road near a pro-Palestinian march by the officer who described him as quite openly Jewish. That phrase is going to go down there, isn't it? The force has since apologised twice. Now, let's talk to GB News political guru, Catherine Forster, to find out what exactly Suella and Priti Patel has also stuck her oar in on this one, hasn't she, Catherine? What have they been saying?
Yes, indeed. Well, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman has been saying very strongly that she thinks the Met Police head, Sir Mark Rowley, should now go. Of course, we know she's not been much of a fan of his for some time now because she called these marches hate marches. She was very critical of them and of the police's handling of them back when she was Home Secretary and before she was indeed sacked. Now, another former Home Secretary, Priti Patel also condemning what's happened and the way that the Met Police has dealt with it. The government, for their part, not going that far. The Energy Secretary, Claire Coutinho, this morning telling Camila Tominey that, yes, obviously this had been badly handled, that it was a misstep, but stopping short of calling for his resignation. But certainly he's in a lot of hot water because the chap at the centre of this row, Gideon Falter, has written in the Sunday Times saying he must quit. The British Board of Deputies of Jews also will be meeting with him this week, as will Policing Minister Chris Philp. So it will be very interesting to see what emerges. But clearly this has been very, very badly handled, not only by the officer in the beginning, because he said the man was openly Jewish and threatening to arrest him rather than supporting him and keeping him safe, but also since then with the sort of apologies, non-apologies, the original so-called apology that they put out basically said we've seen a rising trend of people going along to where they know these marches are happening and videoing them, and this, you know, is deliberate provocation. Obviously, that went down like a ton of bricks. They then apologised for that comment, and now Sir Mark Rowley has also said personally reiterate our apologies, but he has said our officers will continue to police with courage, empathy and impartiality. The problem is that there's many people that simply think that the police are not being impartial in the policing of these protests, and many British Jews really feeling that they are not being supportive and that they cannot safely walk the streets of London on those days.
Catherine, Sir Mark Rowley has been summoned to a meeting with Chris Philp, the policing minister, who himself has said he was deeply concerned by the Met's handling of counter-protests. What do we think is going to come out of this?
I suspect that the government will reiterate the fact that the laws are in place to deal with these protests and that they expect them to be dealt with robustly. I think part of the problem is, however, A, police resources, and B, simply the numbers of people on these protests. I've covered a lot of them, and as they said to this chap the other day in another clip that I've seen, they said to him, there's so many of the protesters and there's not that many of us. Basically, if they attack you, we can't guarantee that we can keep you safe. Now, I had a lot of abuse. I'm not Jewish, but I was reporting on the protest for GB News 3 weeks ago. We were given a lot of abuse on air. There was a policeman standing directly behind me. I'd asked him to stand there. He did nothing. We went round the corner afterwards with the police, and they basically said to me and the camera person and the back watcher, you're obviously not popular here. We advise you to go home for your own safety. They did not say, you're here to do your job, we will make sure that we keep you safe. They said, go home for your own safety. I have to say, though, yesterday I was at a pro-Israeli demonstration, a few dozen Jewish people and supporters of Israel saying we will not be cowed, we're going to stand up and be counted. There was a small counter-protest of pro-Palestinian supporters. They were pretty much outnumbered. But the police there were very good, and me and the cameramen did have their full support. So, you know, it's a mixed picture, but very difficult for the police. And I think they certainly are coming in for a huge amount of criticism.
Catherine Forster, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, let's see what my panel make of that. I'm joined today by author and broadcaster Amy Nicol-Turner and GB News host of the Saturday 5, Albie Amakona. Now, this story has sent shockwaves, I think, through most of the population on this one. You don't have to be Jewish to be upset by this story. And as you've heard Catherine saying then as well, I think the fact that now marches are influencing the British press and the media from reporting what's going on, I find that almost as worrying as the anti-Semitism aspect of this. But Sir Mark Rowley, the buck stops with him, he's head of the Met, so should he go over this, Albie?
I never know what good comes of calling for people to resign, to be honest. I mean, what good would come from it? If Sir Mark Rowley resigned tomorrow, that would just create another crisis in the Met. I'm not sure. He's not been in the job that long. It's not that long since he took over from Dame Cressida Dick, I believe. Look, obviously, there are issues with how these protests are being policed. It is totally wrong that colleagues like Catherine are unable to report on big national events because the police aren't doing their jobs properly. It is totally unacceptable that many Jewish Londoners and indeed Jewish people across the country feel that they can't go into the city centres of major cities like London, Manchester, Birmingham at the weekend because of some of the minority of people at these pro-Palestine protests who are being anti-Semitic and causing trouble. Those people need to be policed properly. I do not go as far as Suella in saying that these are hate marches and that they need to be shut down. There are the vast majority of those people simply want a ceasefire, and it is totally right and totally British that we have freedom of assembly and freedom of association in this country, and I'd feel very uncomfortable if the state were to encroach on that. But it is absolutely proper and right that anyone breaking the law feels the full force of the law, and that's not happening at the moment.
And Gideon Falter, who has given an interview to the Sunday Times, he was the chap involved in this incident, by the way, the Jewish chap who was stopped from crossing the road, basically, because there was a march going on nearby. He has said that maybe it is time for a Macpherson-style report, you know, Stephen Lawrence-style, into institutional racism. He has said that maybe it's time for a report into how the police are handling the level of anti-Semitism that has arisen because of these marches.
Yeah, with this story of that Gideon shared, there was another side to that story in the sense that people that were at the protest at the same time as him said that he was coming from the Israel counter-protest. And so the police were concerned for his safety, that if he were to go across the road, considering where he'd come from, they were shouting slogans like terrorist sympathisers at the other side. So they were concerned for his safety at that moment because of what preluded that video clip.
He says that he was just attending synagogue and walking home from synagogue.
I know that is what he said, but he's also filming it, and there are witnesses around that have said he was coming from a more inflammatory setting before he appeared in front of that police officer. Now, what that police officer said was obviously really inappropriate, but the police have such a hard job at the moment. And I think Suella and other critics are, words wield immense power. And when you're referring to the legitimate democratic marches as mobs and hate marches, to the point that it's not just anti-Semitism that's gone up, Islamophobia has gone up by 335% since October the 7th. There's been reports of Muslim primary schools having to take extra security measures, just as there have been at Jewish primary schools. So it's a very fractious time on both sides of this conflict, which I think the police are doing what they can to keep everyone safe. But 66% of the British public are in favour of a ceasefire. So really, why does protest happen when they feel out of line with the line of the government? So surely something needs to change. The government's stance on Gaza needs to go further to listen to what is the biggest anti-war protest since that against the Iraq War.
And going back to Gideon's story, if we take him for his word, and I see no reason why we shouldn't, he was the one that was stopped by the police, probably for his own safety. This is what the police have said. But meanwhile, the people on the march were coming up to him with their faces covered, shouting repeatedly, scum, 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 and are calling him a Nazi. Disgusting, lock them up, Nazis and scum. Now, so why, when Gideon, who didn't actually say anything, is the one that is being stopped by the police?
Look, it's obviously a situation that should have been handled more differently. But ultimately, the police do have a very difficult job in these protests. I remember I went to, during the Black Lives Matter protest in 2020, there was what was called at the time a White Lives Matter protest. And I went along to the protest just to see what it was like. Now, the police didn't need to say to me, "You're visibly black, what are you doing here?" But police did look at me thinking, well, what are you doing here for your own safety? And I imagine a similar thought was going on here, but they just handled the situation improperly and badly. The police do have a difficult job. Should they have handled this situation differently? Yes. But ultimately, do I think these protests should be going ahead? The majority of the people at these protests are not breaking the law. They should be allowed to go ahead. But the people who are breaking the law should be dealt with the full force of the law. And I think Suella Braverman is right when she talks about two-tier policing that happens at some of these protests. If you remember some of the anti-lockdown protests that were going on, they were treated a lot more harshly than the BLM protests that were going on at the same time. Why is that?
However, when we're talking about anti-Semitism within these pro-Palestine marches, it is also true to say there are plenty of Jewish groups and Jewish individuals on the marches wearing very similar to what Gideon was wearing and have reported absolutely no trouble. So I think it's really difficult with the police when we have this culture of publishing these out-of-context video clips, and they just serve to make the police job even more difficult.
I will also say that I don't think Suella Braverman's interventions on this are helpful at all. It always sticks in the throat for me when Suella Braverman, who I would describe as the most racially insensitive politician in British politics at the moment, talks about racism, discrimination and anti-Semitism. This is a woman who defended the right of someone who owned a pub to have a gollywog in their pub and suggested that people that were offended by that were some sort of woke virtue signallers. And now she's talking about racism and discrimination.
It just plays
really sticks in the
panic,
throat. I just wish she was consistent. We have racism and discrimination in our society. We should seek to root it out against any group that suffers from racism and discrimination, not pitting one against the other, as I think she does.
A woman who was absolutely appalled at the Brussels police for threatening to close down an event which was hosting a suspected right-wing extremist, and other speakers that defended the Christchurch mosque shooter. So she's not consistent. I think we know that by now.
We are literally running out. We could talk about this. Is such an important subject, and we could talk about it all day. But unfortunately, we have run out of time. For all the best analysis and opinion on that story, though, and much, much more, please do go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, there's still plenty of time to grab your chance to win a Greek cruise, travel goodies, and a £10,000 tax-free cash bank balance boost. Oh my God, I could do with this. Here's all the details you need.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I could really fancy a bit of that. That water just looks absolutely stunning, doesn't it? Right, OK, well, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. This is a good story, this one. Now, one head teacher in Notting Hill has come up with a radical new way to tackle phone addiction amongst his pupils. Introduce a 12-hour school day. What do you make of that one? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the red wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Nana Akua. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. 2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Sunday. Hope you're having a wonderful Sunday afternoon out there. I'm Dawn Neeson. I'm on your telly, online and digital radio, so no escape, basically. Now, one head teacher in Notting Hill has come up with a radical new way to tackle phone addiction amongst his pupils. Introduce a 12-hour school day. The head teacher of All Saints Catholic College has banned students from carrying smartphones and introduced sports and cookery classes to prevent them from wasting their time on the smartphones at home. This comes as Rishi Sunak is reportedly planning to introduce a ban on under-16s buying smartphones. So, we're asking, should we ban smartphones for school children? Let's see what my wonderful panel, who are still with me, I know it's a miracle, make of this one. Now, Amy, you've got a little boy, he's 9 now, I believe. So, as a mum, this sounds like a good idea, does it?
Oh, it sounds like a brilliant idea, especially for working
You just want to get your kid off your hands.
7 till 7, amazing. Never had anything as good as that for a long time. But yeah, I don't understand why any child needs a phone in school, really. And I think most schools have banned phones. So it doesn't really need legislation necessarily around it, because I think most schools are taking the initiative to ban phones.
The way legislation stands at the moment, it's down to each school to come up with its own routine as to how they deal with this problem. But I've never heard this one before. I mean, that is literally kids at school for 12 hours.
It doesn't seem overly practical, though, does it? We can't even get enough teachers as it is for the 9 till 3. So how is it going to work? I think it's a great idea in principle. I can't see how it's actually possible.
You just want to get your little boy off your hands for 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
Albie, what do you make of it?
I think this is a brilliant idea. I mean, look, I do think we actually need legislation to protect children from smartphones, which are meant for adults. You know, I'm with Miriam Cates on this. I think we should be banning smartphones for children under the age of 16 because it is robbing people of their childhoods, and it is driving a crisis of mental health in our young people. We see these really quite profound levels of depression, anxiety, different types of body dysmorphia in young people, and it almost correlates exactly with the introduction of smartphones. Now, correlation doesn't mean causation. We don't know that smartphones are causing all of these mental health issues in our young people, but I do think it's interesting that it does seem to correlate with the introduction of smartphones. And I was reading a statistic the other day where it was something like a third of children under the age of 5 have access to a smartphone.
3-year-olds.
3-years.
3-year-olds are given smartphones.
Which is nuts. You just think, well, what parent would give their child a smartphone? And actually, if legislation is needed to stop parents giving their children a smartphone, then so be it.
But is it smartphones or is it social media? Because I personally can't see a problem with a child having a smartphone from a young age, because they kind of learn their way around the technology, how to Google things, take pictures, whatever. But I do see a problem with them having social media accounts.
But then if we're reading this article, what actually is happening is that kids are not learning social skills. So instead of talking to each other and playing with their friends, they're playing video games online with people in different countries. And so they're not actually able to interact and learn that social interaction that you do at school. That's an important part of school. It's not just all about getting A's in your GCSEs or A-levels. It's also about learning how to be a human, interacting with people. They're actually not able to do that because they're so engrossed in their phones. And I just think this is a ticking time bomb. And we'll look back in 30 years' time and think, why didn't we act quicker?
Yeah, it's interesting. This headmaster, who's got 3 children himself, by the way, that said he noticed that pupils were growing worse at making eye contact and holding conversations. And the other thing I found worrying in this was that he found some of the most shocking things I've ever seen on phones he had confiscated from his pupils, including pupils blackmailing strangers and even catfishing one another. And these are, I mean, kids from sort of like the age of 11 upwards. I mean, it's just...
I think it's hard for this generation of parents, though, because we didn't grow up with phones or smartphones or social media. I think I've got a 9-year-old and I'm quite young having him, and I was 18 when Facebook came out. We don't know how to navigate this as kids, and the kids being brought up now are digital natives. They're the first generation that have grown up from birth with social media and smartphones, so they're almost at the proper coalface of this. And while we try and work out
that's the problem with actually the banning the phones or the social media thing. They're much smarter than we are at it. Well, everyone's much smarter than me. Right, OK, we have to move on, unfortunately. I'm Daubney, and this is GB News Sunday, and there's plenty more coming up on today's show. But first, here's the news with Cameron.
Thanks, Dawn. It's 2:31. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. British Jewish leaders will meet the Metropolitan Police Commissioner later this week after accusing the force of a series of high-profile errors. Sir Mark Rowley is facing calls to quit over his handling of pro-Palestinian protests, with the former Home Secretary also suggesting he's emboldened anti-Semites. The Board of Deputies of British Jews says mistakes have had a devastating effect on the previously high level of trust held in the police. A decision by the US to approve £49 billion in aid for Ukraine has been welcomed by the UK, with the Foreign Secretary describing it as a vital step forward. President Zelensky says the move will keep the war from expanding and will save thousands of lives. It now heads to the Senate, which is expected to pass the bill in the next few days. A record 50,000 people are running the London Marathon today. Supporters are lining the streets to cheer them on as they attempt to complete the 26.2-mile route. They started just after 10 o'clock, the event raising millions of pounds for charities. Professional athletes were first off the mark, with Olympic champion Perez Jepchirchir setting a new world record for the women. The Kenyan finished the race in 2 hours, 16 minutes and 16 seconds. Another Kenyan, Alexander Munyeo, won the men's event. He completed the distance in 2 hours and 4 minutes. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you much, Cameron, and indeed congratulations to everyone doing the marathon today. Now, there's plenty more coming up on today's show, but before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, let's find out what the lovely Nana's got on her show, which starts at 3 o'clock. Nana, what you've got coming up?
God, well, I couldn't think of anything worse than running a marathon. God, I did it in 1999, the turn of the century. I said, I'm never doing that again. But coming up on my show, because it's an athletic sort of day, I've got an excellent mystery guest who was in the field of athletics, and she, as a mystery guest, will drop clues throughout the show. Also asking, is it actually time for Mark Rowley to resign? There's loads of awful things that have happened on his watch. And now, you know, looking at it, Jewish people should be able to be safe in the streets of London, surely. And if they can't be and he can't police it, then what should he be doing? So is it time for him to go? And then looking at what Penny Mordaunt was saying about an Iron Dome, does the UK need something like an Iron Dome to protect itself?
Interesting debate, considering we can't afford our warships or planes at the moment. Be interesting one. That sounds great stuff. Thank you very much, Nana. Now, remember, let me know all your thoughts on the stories we've been discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation, or even simpler, message me on our socials at GB News. Loads more coming up on today's show. We'll be debating the reported eco-zealot plot to secure key jobs at major airports and storm runways to unleash an unprecedented summer of holiday hell around the globe. All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So it's another dry start for many of us this morning with plenty of sunshine around. However, cloudier conditions out towards Scotland due to this weak weather front that's going to be sinking its way southwards through the rest of today. High pressure is still in charge though, so that will be bringing us those sunnier skies, particularly across much of England, Wales and Northern Ireland through today, probably seeing the best of the sunshine. Maybe the odd 1 or 2 showers just skirting along the southeast coast of England, but it's across eastern parts of Scotland and into Northern England that will see the cloudier skies today, with outbreaks of rain slowly pushing their way southwards through the day. Feeling warm in that sunshine, highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the south, perhaps 16 across Northern Ireland, but definitely feeling chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Sunday, that cloud continues to sink its way southwards across much of the UK overnight and into the early hours of Monday morning. Southern and eastern parts of England perhaps holding on to some of those clearest skies for the longest time into the early hours of the morning. So turning quite chilly here. We could see some frost with temperatures in the low single figures, but generally staying not quite as cold elsewhere. Temperatures in the high single figures quite widely. So it's a cloudy and damp start for many of us on Monday. Outbreaks of rain continue to spread their way southwards as we go through the day on Monday. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely a greyer and more cloudy day than we've seen over the weekend. Perhaps some hazy sunshine across the very far southeast, but it's parts of Scotland that will see the best of the sunshine through the afternoon, and a bit of a chillier day as well, with highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the north.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The
People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello, welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. I'm transfixed by your messages. Lots of you have been sending your thoughts in, and I'm going to read some. Look, that's how you do it. That's what I was waiting for, right? www.gbnews.com/your say. I'm really trying hard to remember it, I know, but keep it on the screen. But lots of you have been getting in touch, and lots of you on the Israel-Palestinian march and the Jewish community, etc., etc. And should Mark Rowley be sacked? Karen, good afternoon. Karen says the commissioner should be sacked, the officers should be retrained, and the marches should be stopped. The Jewish community deserve to be able to walk anywhere in safety, and any officer repeating that awful discourse should be sacked. Lots of you agreeing with Karen there. Meanwhile, Oliver says the police would be sensible to limit the number of protests so that police time can be deployed to fighting crime rather than facilitating all these protest marches, which the other side of this is the fact that they are costing us upwards of £30 million now. And Colin says the problem with the police is they are not upholding the law. Rather, they apply it subjectively in a way that placates and maintains the status quo. Acts of violence and incitement has to be dealt with properly and not ignored. Many are protesting peacefully, but those who are not must be brought to account. That is the problem, isn't it? It does seem to be one law for one law for another, two-tier policing. But I have to read this one out as well. This is Darren. Hi, Darren. This is the channel of free speech. Yes. Why are the most things why do you never read out anything from me? Well, hello, Darren. I've just read that out. That's from you, and I've read it out. So, any case, don't be like Darren. Get in touch. I'll read it out, I promise.
Is it Darren Grimes?
No.
Hi, Darren.
Look, that's how you do it, right? gbnews.com/your say. Join the conversation, or our socials at GB News. Right, it's very simple. And we will read them out, but we've run out of time, unfortunately. Now, looking forward to a summer holiday this year? Right, you might be speaking too soon. Eco groups are reportedly planning to inflict widespread travel chaos across the world this summer by getting jobs at major airports and then storming runways and planes. They are hoping to take advantage of flight schedules to wreak havoc, maximum disruption possible. But security experts are warning of a major threat to passenger safety at one of the busiest times of the year. Let's see what my panel make of this one. I tell you what, right, if they start this on Wednesday, when I'm going on a much-needed holiday, giving you all a break as well, by the way, I won't be responsible for my actions. I'm sorry, this is not winning me over to their cause, Albie.
Not at all. I was just thinking I'm going away at the end of May, and I hope this isn't happening at the end of May either. Lots of people around the country, go on holiday at least once a year, and it is wonderful that with cheap flights it's enabled people of all classes to travel around the world and enjoy what used to be the reserve of the rich. So when these eco-zealots talk about disrupting the holidays of ordinary hard-working men and women up and down the United Kingdom, it's really not going to win them any favours with that group of people. In actually a country which is generally quite in favour of net zero and quite in favour of decarbonising and quite in favour of the green revolution, this is just putting people off when actually the United Kingdom has done more than almost any G7 economy to decarbonise. Why don't they go and do this in China?
Oh,
why don't they go and do this in America?
Not why don't they do it in China?
But it's a serious point, Amy. The UK makes up 1% of global emissions.
The UK. And also, if you take it... Oh, well, now we're going to go off on a tangent. But,
Let's stick to this tangent. I prefer this one.
OK, fine. We are doing a lot, you're right. But in January, we handed out 24 new oil and gas licences. Now, that seems counterproductive to where we're at with the national grid and the transfer into renewable energies. It just seems at odds with our efforts to be opening new oil and gas licences. But I've always been a fan of Just Stop Oil. I admire the push that they have and their belief in their cause. But they've lost me even with this one.
Blimey, Amy.
Because airports make people really anxious, OK? A lot of people don't already have enough going on without the need for this. And this feeds into the whole thing that people will now be all saying eco-zealots, eco-terrorists, because they're going into an airport and disrupting flights, which when they had the when they, for example, went into the art galleries through the tomato soup at the art, that was really impactful because it got all the press, but it didn't really disrupt ordinary people. This will cause massive disruption to ordinary people and be scary, right? So I don't think they needed to do this.
So, but I mean, there is
There's other ways to get press and get your message across, I think, which they've proved.
As security experts are actually saying, this is actually stopping them becoming eco-zealots and turning them to eco-terrorists. It's actually dangerous.
Yeah,
they could be putting their lives at risk and the lives of passengers. I mean, you're running out on a runway.
I just wonder what their cause is, because ultimately, as I mentioned before, the general public are vastly in favour of decarbonisation. So I don't understand the point of what they're trying to do. We already live in a country. We already live in a country which has decarbonised more than almost any other G7 economy in the world. I take your point about oil and gas licences. Maybe they're unhappy about that. But even Amy, the most ardent green scientists and economists out there would tell you that we are going to need oil and gas for quite some time before we can fully transition to green energy. And even after that, we'll need that when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining for baseload if we're not going to get that from nuclear. So I just wish people on the green revolution side of the argument would be honest about the need for oil and gas even after we achieve net zero, because it's going to be important for baseload. And actually what a lot of people on the green revolution side of things is they're anti-nuclear power. So they're anti any source of power which can be guaranteed, which is either nuclear or oil and gas. They're anti it. It's impractical,
I think probably they would respond and say it's the government who aren't always completely honest, because if on the one hand it's true we are doing a lot to decarbonise, but then on the other hand they're opening they're giving out new oil and gas licences, and then they're trying to make public perception think that this will bring down your bills.
So is it better to get oil and gas from our own oil and gas fields or from Russia?
Well, it's a global market, so it doesn't really make difference.
It does make a difference, because the way that gas is transported is if you condense it into liquefied natural gas, and if we're getting gas from the North Sea, we're actually most likely to sell it to the European market, not ship it over to China or over to America.
I think the way that the picture is painted is it's seen, oh, we're going to get our oil and gas from the North Sea.
But
we're going to use that directly. That's not what we're going to do. It's going to go into a global market. We're going to buy it back.
And sold in Europe.
Potentially could be sold anywhere in Europe. People imagine, oh, I'm going to use the oil and gas made in the UK, which isn't actually what's going on, and it won't lower your bills.
But it will secure our energy, and it's also about energy security and energy independence, not just about prices. And in a world where we are seeing geopolitical tension make it more difficult to import things from overseas, I think it is prudent and proper that Europe makes the most of its own natural resources, and that includes North Sea oil and gas.
Any case, Wednesday, Heathrow, just don't, all right? End of May?
End of May, Heathrow. Don't even think about it.
Not if you want to live. Any case. I'm sorry, I'm threatening people this afternoon. Any case. I'm Daubney. I'm being very violent, aren't I? This is GB News Sunday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Not so cheap as chips. The price of potatoes has soared as this year's heavy rainfall hits people in the pocket. Will your bag of spuds be worth its weight in gold? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30. One more story in. Milton Keynes, absolute chaos in the city. 300-odd youths arrested or at least involved in a
stampede.
A stampede.
Yeah,
what's been going on?
A stampede through the...
there we are.
This is the video. So this is a stampede through a shopping centre in Milton Keynes. I think, Amy, you live there, don't you? You live nearby.
For those on radio, we can see literally hundreds, scores of kids.
I think there are about 300 kids.
Are they in school uniforms?
Yeah, quite.
This is as they've broken up from school, presumably.
Security tried to intervene. They've been accused of being heavy-handed. But I think this speaks to the fact that the landscape of youth services has just been decimated and there's literally nothing for kids.
So hang on, whoa. You think that this has happened because social services have been diluted?
Youth services.
This is because there's no police around, there's no oversight, there's no deterrent, and 300 kids think that they can run through a shopping centre, frightening shoppers out of their lives.
Going to a shopping centre.
Amy, sorry, my kids would not be behaving like that because there's no ping pong available at the local
Aren't your kids like
youth
age
centre.
4 and 5? These are teenagers, and our teenagers are headed into a world where there are no leisure services, there are no
nothing to do with crime. Boo-hoo. If we up the ante on basketball, it's not going to stop kids being stabbed on the street.
What creates antisocial behaviour is having nothing to do.
It's lack of discipline in the home, lack of discipline in the home, and lack of policing on the streets, and a judiciary and a penal system that is utterly liberal.
You're going right to the end of the line. What about the preventative measures?
What about the people that these people affect by running through a shopping centre and stampeding? When there's mothers with kids in prams frightened out of their lives, and we're worried about the social services
I'm
aspect
talking about
that's
carrot.
perhaps led to it.
You're talking about stick, right?
Yeah. So how long does your solution take to resolve it? Mine takes about 30 seconds. More police, bang them up. Yours...
Russell, should parents be fined?
More police, bang them up.
Absolutely. And the kids should be taken to task.
Join me, Camila Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camila Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, lots of you have been sending in your thoughts. Thank you very much. And do keep them coming. And some of them are even quite nice, and some of them, you don't spell obnoxious with an A, by the way. Just saying, just helpful. Right, any case, that's how you get in touch there on your screens. If you're on the radio, it's www.gbnews.com/yoursay. Now, I'm going to read some of the nice ones out. Right, on Israel, Simon says, the ceasefire is in the hands of the terrorists. Release the hostage and stop attacking Israel. Then the war will end. Nothing to do with the marches. Lots of you saying that. And on the anti-Semitism row, Dave says, if Mark Rowley really believes that these marches have been policed with impartiality, it shows how deluded he is and therefore unfit is to be in the role of Met Commissioner. Not a lot of love in the room, it has to be said. Meanwhile, on St George's Day, we're talking about the flag. St George's Day should be celebrated across England. It is the day of our patron saint, and there should be no shame attached to being proud to being English. Well, I don't think there is in most areas of the panel. Any case, should we talk some potatoes? The price of potatoes has soared as this year's heavy rainfall hits people in the pocket. Some farmers face the prospect of having no spring harvest for the first time since the Second World War, as their land has been underwater for months and supermarkets are passing on the cost to their customers. In fact, most supermarkets have already shrunk the size of potato packs without any decrease in price. So, Amy, potatoes, have they had their chips?
Well, it would seem that potatoes are shrinking due to climate change, which is maybe why, from what we talked about earlier, maybe that's what's really annoyed Just Off Oil, the lack of potatoes.
Well, why don't they go and chuck something over a potato field?
Do you remember last year?
Keep off the runways.
When we went into the supermarkets and there was a shortage of tomatoes and salad. Do you remember that? There was just none for ages, the salad shortage. And people were saying, is it Brexit or is it the weather? seems it was actually due to the producers in Europe, extreme weather going on there. Now, the same thing has happened this year, which has affected potato prices, and they're soaring because of all the extreme rainfall that we've had across Europe.
Could just be a wet winter. We've had them before, you know.
Well, seems to be
just a thought. Albie?
Look,
are you a fan of spuds?
I am a fan of spuds, and actually I was just thinking as we were talking about potatoes that I'm going to buy myself a massive packet of crisps to eat on the train home, salt and vinegar, I think, and I would be very upset if that packet of crisps was smaller in size, but they were charging me the same amount for the packet of crisps, and that's exactly what is happening in this story. We have seen packets of potatoes that used to be 2.5 kilograms in weight, shrunk down to 2 kilograms in weight, but the supermarkets are charging customers the same.
How
and
much
most
are
people, most of it probably won't have even realised, because we're not really so much looking at the weight of things. I mean, at least I don't.
No, I don't.
I just pick it up and think, oh, I'm buying my potatoes and buying my crisps. I'm expecting it to be the same every time, but actually, because of what's going on, it might be because of climate change, it might just be because of, hey, the weather, which changes quite a lot in Britain, but it's actually having an impact on people's weekly shops.
But this issue with the weather, I mean, is it anything to do with floodplains and the fact that we sort of like constantly don't do drainage properly in this country, do you think?
Look, we've got to adapt to the weather that we have. I'm not a climate change denier. Climate change is happening, but we can't stop it. We've got to adapt to it, and that means farming practices that are going to adapt with the weather that we have.
In any case, you've had your chips as well, young man, because we're come to the end of the show. Well, I've been Dawn Neeson, and this has been GB News Sunday, but don't go anywhere, though, because there's plenty more coming up on GB News today. In a moment, it's Fiery Debate with Nana Akua, and at 6 p.m, it's Neil Oliver, with Free Speech Nation at 7 o'clock. Mark Dolan at 9. That's a really busy schedule for you. But don't go anywhere. Nana's up next, and thank you for watching. Really enjoyed your company and the comments, but here's the weather with Ellie.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So after another sunny day for most of us, there is a further cloud and rain on the way, all thanks to an area of low pressure well up to the north of the UK, but bringing these weak frontal systems that will sink their way southwards through the rest of the day. We do still have high pressure around, but that slowly slips away towards the northwest. So the cloudiest skies through the rest of today, definitely for eastern parts of Scotland, northern England, and slowly sinking their way southwards across much of the UK through the early hours of Monday morning. Western parts of Scotland, Northern Ireland generally staying that little bit drier, but it's southern and eastern parts of England that will see those clear skies and some chilly temperatures with some frost in places, but not quite as cold under all that cloud and rain. That does mean that Monday starts a much cloudier day for most of us, particularly compared to the weekend, with the outbreaks of rain that we see through the morning slowly slipping their way southwards as we go through the rest of the day. Not turning particularly heavy, but definitely cloudier and a much damper day than we saw over the weekend. Northern parts of Scotland probably seeing the best of the sunshine through the afternoon and feeling quite warm across much of Scotland, highs of 14 or 15 degrees, but definitely chillier under all that cloud and rain. Through the rest of Monday and into the start of Tuesday, that weak frontal system eventually clears its way towards the southeast, leaving a bright start for many of us with plenty of sunshine through Tuesday morning. Southern and eastern parts still staying quite cloudy with outbreaks of rain, and there'll be further showers through Tuesday.